Hi guys, I think I came up with a workaround. The fact that Canvas won't let me upload my narrated PowerPoints, they're too long. Sorry about that, everybody. So I'm doing narrated PowerPoints and uploading them to YouTube, and I'll send them to you on the YouTube link or URL. Once you click on that, when you see it in the module, you have to open it in a new window. But we're gonna troubleshoot all of these issues we've been having, and I appreciate your patience. Real quick, I mentioned Wampum Belts in the Forgotten Founders. If you haven't watched it yet, please do. PowerPoint. But I also wanted to talk about two that I didn't mention in that presentation. I talked about the fact that George Washington had a wampum belt made to commemorate the 1794 Treaty of Canandaigua, which was signed in New York between the newly created Americans, the U.S. government, and the Haudenosaunee. And then I also talked about the Hiawatha Belt, which is meant to represent, in the very first slide of Forgotten Founders, I say you're looking at the first draft of the Constitution, and you'll see why when you take a look at the entire presentation. But that's meant to represent the original 5 nations of the Haudenosaunee League: the Mohawk, the Seneca, the Cayuga, Oneida, and Onondaga. Obviously, in 1722, the Tuscarora joined the League. But that original Hiawatha Belt does show the original 5 nations that comprise the Haudenosaunee Confederacy or the Haudenosaunee League. But there are 2 earlier ones that, if you have the document in front of you, one is called Dish with One Spoon. This was actually between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe. Some people call them Ojibwe. We call them Chippewa here in Montana. They're kind of a subset of the Anishinaabe or Ojibwe. And basically it's meant to represent the idea that everything is to be shared: land, resources, hunting grounds. So there's one bowl and one spoon, and everybody sits around and everybody takes part in that common meal. We don't know what date that wampum belt was created, but we can surely assume that it was hundreds of years before any Europeans set foot on North America or Turtle Island. The other one is the 2-row wampum, and this was a treaty. The wampum belts actually mark treaties between nations, and if you don't know, treaties are the highest law of the land, and they can only be between 2 sovereign nations. So when you think about it, all the treaties that North American tribes signed with the United States and Canadian government are basically recognizing their sovereignty as separate nations. But the 2-row wampum, again, was between the Dutch, well before the British got here, even before the French, the Dutch were here. And it basically is meant to symbolize 2 forms of water travel going down the same river. One of the strands is the Haudenosaunee birch bark canoe. The other strand is the Dutch ships upon which they were riding when they arrived on the shores of North America. But the message is that it is possible for 2 different communities to live together in harmony without interfering with the other one, without obstructing their progress, without getting in their way. It's a beautiful, I think, symbolic metaphor for living in peace, which is the message of the Haudenosaunee, the great law of peace. So take a look at those wampum belts. You know, there's a big misunderstanding that the Haudenosaunee used wampum as a form of currency. Yes, they traded these shells from the clams that were in their bodies of water, but they did much more than that. And like I said, they were really used as tools, mnemonic devices to convey more important messages that we see displayed in these beautiful wampum belts. So take a look at that, and I'll be getting back with you on another narrated PowerPoint. Thank you.